Hello students and welcome to BA131 Module 7. We are on the final stretch. We have this module and next module. We're almost done. This is our penultimate module for the semester. So let's go ahead and get started. Here we have the introduction. We're going to be covering government translations and interpretations in controversial topics. So the objectives are to translate properly the names of government agencies, how to write controversial topics and legislation. We're going to review the assignments. We have a quiz this week, and then an important announcement regarding the final. When we translate the names of government agencies, it's important to use the proper translation. As you know, there's more than one way of translating and interpreting, but we need to utilize the proper official translation into Spanish of that government organization. The same thing goes with any other organization, but specifically here we are talking about government agencies. What you want to do is check the agency website first. Most of them have a Spanish website equivalent that has been translated by humans. Some of them are Google translated, so you need to be careful about those that are automatically translated and those who are professionally translated by human beings. Another option is to Google the name of the agency in Spanish. Also check if Spanish language media has covered news related to this agency. But also be careful. Many years ago, it's been a while now, but many years ago, one of the Spanish-speaking media, I don't know if it was Univision or Telemundo, was covering an issue that was happening at the Department of Motor Vehicles. And the reporter called it Departamento de Motores y Vehículos. Of course, that is not the proper translation of the Department of Motor Vehicles. Just because that is the order of the name, Department of Motor Vehicles, a literal translation, Departamento de Motores y Vehículos, you have to think about it. What does the DMV do? They register things, vessels, vehicles with motors, right? So they don't register the motor. You don't take your motor or your engine to the DMV and register it. So no es motores y vehículos. What is that? What are we talking about? Motor vehicles. That is an adjective and a noun. A motor vehicle is a vehicle that runs on motors. How do you say that in Spanish? Departamento de Vehículos Motorizados. So sometimes, if you're not sure about a translation, even though it's in the media, even though it was seen and heard by millions of people, you have to have better common sense than that. We have some examples here at the federal level. U.S. Citizenship and Immigration Services, or USCIS, is translated as El Servicio de Ciudadanía e Inmigración de Estados Unidos. That is the official translation. Servicios de Aduanas y Protección Fronteriza is the CBP, U.S. Customs and Border Protection. Servicio de Inmigración y Control de Aduanas, ICE, U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement. So the proper procedure is to do that, is to look for the original source, the agency itself, and cross-reference that with news coverage in Spanish about those agencies, if you can find it. Homework 7 deals with this. You're going to look for the names of government agencies in Spanish. Very important, do not write your own. Do not Google Translate the names of those agencies because you are going to need to provide the proper official translation. We'll look at that in the Canvas. Here we have an introduction to DACA in Spanish, and we'll see the official translation of that in just a moment, so pay attention to that. The official translation of DACA is La Acción Diferida para los Llegados en la Infancia. And of course, deferred action for childhood arrivals could be translated, interpreted in different ways, but this is the official translation. And as I've mentioned before, when you write it in Spanish, and you're going to be writing an article or translating an article, you're going to be using the acronym DACA throughout the article. So because you're going to be doing that, and this does not match ADLI, right? No es ADLI, es DACA. So you have to put DACA in italics because you are reading this in Spanish and you are reading this in English, and this tells the reader that this is an English acronym, and then you specify por sus siglas en inglés. And then throughout the article you can continue using DACA as it is in English. When you do most translation, you are going to use usted format, the formal address. Make sure that the subject-verb agreement is correct. Be sure to use articles, el, la, los, las. Many times in English, the phrasing is kind of telegraphic. Childhood arrivals did this and that. But in Spanish, you have to say los llegados en la infancia, etc. You have to use the articles, so pay attention to that. Read it first, do not translate it literally. And for the assignment, I'll show you in the module, you only have to translate for the assignment the first 4 paragraphs from English to Spanish. I put the whole article there for your reference. You can be ambitious and translate the whole thing, but the assignment is just for the first 4 paragraphs. When you translate something, set your Word document to Spanish proofing so that you can notice any of the misspellings automatically, and spell check before you submit the translation. Make sure that you correct any red underlined words in your document before you submit, and read it to make sure it makes sense. The mark of a good translation is that it reads as if it were written in Spanish first. It doesn't read as a translation. It doesn't feel like, oh, this came from English. And you may have noticed that. You may have noticed some document, invitation, or something else that when you read it, oh, this sounds like English. It's in Spanish, but it sounds like English. So that is not the mark of a good translation. A good translation reads as if it were written in the target language first. Some of the common mistakes in class exercise 7 is that DACA is translated incorrectly. I gave you the proper translation that you want to use. The placement of the quotations, we talked about that before, so pay attention to that. When this ends like this, the last word, then you have the quotation mark and then the period on the outside. And if you do a Google translation and do not proof it, that is going to be incorrect. And doing literal translations, we talked about that before. We'll talk about discussion 7. And this week you have the quiz for modules 4 to 5. Check the deadline for that. The study guide is in module 6. They are all write-in answers, no multiple choice. So it's okay to have open your special education glossary. And you can review the lectures and the PowerPoints for modules 4 and 5. Check the deadlines in the modules, and I have an announcement about office hours for the final exam. We'll take a look at that in a moment. So here is the sequence for module 7. You have the introduction, the video lecture, a bit of information on what DACA is, and the assignments, quiz, study guide for part 1 of the final exam, and audio about final and the office hours, and the final summary. This week we are covering interpreting and translating for controversial topics. Go ahead and read this introduction. This just mentions what I said earlier. We're coming to the end of our class. This is what we'll be doing. These are the assignments and a bit of an introduction in this topic that as translators and interpreters we often find ourselves in the midst of sensitive and controversial situations, and we do have to be swift and quick, but at the same time we have to be precise and diplomatic in our renditions of controversial topic terms. Here is the PowerPoint for Module 7 if you wish to download that or open it. The video lecture will be here. This is the information on what DACA is. When the Biden administration had their final rule, it would codify DACA. There was a rescission of the law by the Trump administration in 2017. But that was ruled unlawful by the Supreme Court in 2020. So go ahead and read through this. And you have a PDF with information right there. Here is class exercise 7. You're going to translate from English to Spanish this DACA article, only the first 4 paragraphs. Be sure to submit in a Word document. You change the default language of your document to Spanish so you can check your Spanish grammar and spelling. And be sure to translate DACA in Spanish as la acción diferida para los llegados en la infancia, DACA, por sus siglas en inglés. And if you have a different translation, or if you put DACA in lowercase, then you'll have points deducted for that. This is the article in the New York Times, but sometimes if you access it more than once, you may need a subscription. So here's a copy of the document from the header to the bold 1, 2, 3, 4 paragraphs. This is what you have to submit, including the headline, and this is for you to finish reading it if you wish. and you can, if you feel ambitious, continue and translate more, but the requirement is this part right here. Homework 7, you're going to submit the official Spanish translation of these agencies: the Internal Revenue Service, Social Security Administration, U.S. Department of Homeland Security, Department of State, Small Business Administration, the Census Bureau, Employment Development Department of California, Department of Insurance of California, Department of Motor Vehicles of California, and California Department of Education. You submit that in a Word document. For our discussion, this is the use of Spanish in controversial topics. So read this introduction about this topic, and what you have to do is right here. This is a reference article from Univision. You can read it as a reference, and what you're going to do for your discussion is research in Google or in any other search engine a Spanish language newspaper article, TV, social media post, radio or podcast that talks about the Black Lives Matter movement that is dated from 2019 to 2023. Post the link in your discussion. How did they translate BLM in Spanish? What did you think of the article? Do you believe that there was plenty and accurate coverage of the BL in Spanish language television, radio, and social media posts? How is the BLM movement related to Latinos and immigrants' rights? Do you think there is more coverage in Spanish related to police brutality against Latinos? Do you believe the Spanish language media covered BLM as it should? And comment on at least 2 of your classmates' posts. The deadlines are the same: Friday for your post, Sunday for your replies. Here's a quiz for modules 4 to 5. 10 questions, 20 points each. You have the study guide in the previous module, module 6. And here is the study guide for part 1 of the final exam. And I cover this in the audio, so go ahead and check this audio where I talk about the final, preparing for the final, and office hours. I'm offering a couple of opportunities for office hours, so check the audio for that. And that's it. We're coming to the end of the semester. This is module 7. Next week is finals week. This is what you will have covered, and you have the deadlines for the final exam. The final consists of 2 parts: an action plan, reflection paper with 1,200 points, and terminology and proofing 800 points. And this combined is 35% of your final grade. Alright, if you have any questions, send me a message. Otherwise, have a wonderful week.